I love it. I love it. Got another brother real quick. All right, Muslim Jedi. I like that name. That's dope. We'll bring you up, brother. I love your question. I think it's an amazing question. And the whole idea, and I'm very solution oriented, which is why I started this channel, which is why it's important that I bring up people that I know have done the job, people that one I can vouch for specifically, so we can have these conversations today. And so I think that discussion deserves its own show. You know, me and you get together and let's talk about just raw solutions. Hold on before you
Go
dive
ahead.
into
I'm sorry,
that.
Muslim Jose.
No, I want to ask if it's okay to talk about. Remember, you had shared with me the thing about the homicide thing, you know, and the sleep. If you want to share with that before we dive in, that I want to get Muslim Jedi to give his question to the panel. And before we dive into that question too, I want everybody to recognize what these two gentlemen are saying about what we actually go through. One of the reasons why I left my first department was because I was having a hard time dealing with all the deaths and all the violence. You guys, it got to me. And so after 7 years, I ended up leaving, trying to find a peaceful way, you know. And so we'll have to talk about that another time on when we talk about mental health. But you guys have to recognize that the leading cause of death amongst officers is suicide, you know, and a lot of people don't talk about that. But that is the leading cause of death for law enforcement. Is we also know the domestic violence that comes out of law enforcement homes as well. That's a problem too. So that's something that we are going to talk on. Muslim Jedi, thank you so much for signing up, brother. It's the first time I've seen you on the channel. So welcome coming up on the stream. What are your thoughts? Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts? Do you have any questions for our guest C, or you have a question for Dre or myself?
Dude, just a couple of thoughts on my background, and then I'll lead into the question I propose about the youth engagement with police officers and departments. So with me, out of high school, enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserves, ended up playing some college ball, went to school for IT, got almost 20 years working in IT in various fields. Right now, I'm working to finish my cybersecurity degree so I can go to law school. In 2012, I attempted to become a police officer here locally. Passed the test. It was kind of I think the age limit was 32. It was the last test before my 33rd birthday. So I was like, man, let me go take it. And I did well on it. And I ended up getting in a car accident and getting a spine fusion. So I never completed the physical fitness portion of that. But one thing that I've been focused on intently over the past few years is engaging these kids and providing them an alternative to what we see on the streets. And in my experience, you know, they want to be pushed, they want to be challenged. And I was introduced to you last night. I tuned in to check into Mr. White and that whole engagement. And then once the other gentleman chimed in, it kind of, you know, derailed the whole focus. But I was hoping to learn from, you know, yourself and the other gentleman on the panel about how do we move the needle forward? Because with me, I have a certain level of urgency that I don't think is matched by a lot of our community members.
Yes.
So for me, it's what can we do now, which I have a solution. So coding and trading, that's I stand behind that 100%. As someone who's been in IT, you don't need a degree. You can get you a certificate and make more money than some people with college degrees. So I support that wholeheartedly. But the other component to that is, okay, you get this great paying job. How long are you going to keep it? Are you going to be on time? Are you going to have a positive attitude? All these other mitigating factors that aren't addressed normally. And that's where this program comes in, because it's, okay, let's talk about discipline. Let's talk about self-control. Let's talk about your motivations. Talk about personal responsibility. And let's have some fun while we're doing it. And when I initially started this program, the majority, it's all non-paid volunteers, but it's prior military and cops. So cops, that's why I got the term cops and kids. So it seems cops get it. I don't want to go too far off on the tangent, but I've been arrested twice in my life, and once was for engaging an for behavior I thought was inappropriate with some children I was mentoring. Didn't have a facility just like now, so we were on the street. There was some side arguments, a whole gang activity, and my kids got swooped up in that. And I was explaining to the officer, you know, these kids are not a part of that. I understand you got a job to do. And then it immediately turned to me that I was the problem. I needed to go into the house, which I refused. I just stepped onto my property, and then he ended up arresting me. But
it got you what, for obstruction or something, or
exactly
obstruction.
Yep. Yep. And it got dismissed, and the judge kind of scolded me, like, because I told him, like, I'm not on punishment. You can't send me in the house. And the judge was like, you know, you could have handled that better. Which, you know. And the second time was the other component to my channel, which is father's rights. And we talk about how mama's boys are turning into shooters is because fathers are not in the home and they don't have that guidance structure. And, you know, it's cool that, you know, I'm able to reach a few kids here and there, but we need responsible men in the home. And part of the issue is the false allegations against men. That was the second time I was arrested. And I'm explaining to the officer while I'm being booked and detained. I'm like, you know, you got the wrong. I'm making this job easy. Like, okay, this is going to happen, so I'm going to apply. You know, let's get through this. But just to let you know what I'm trying to do, and I explained my whole youth program and all that, and he was just like floored. I'm like, I'm trying to make your job safe, but you have to deal with this nonsense, which pulls you. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say you brought up a couple interesting things, and if anybody wants to chime in, I'll let C jump on it first. Before you leave, though, I definitely want you to send me your email because I think it's worth having a conversation separate and just really discussing that. Because I would also like to hear your thoughts on how officers can improve on their communication with people from the community, right? That communication is definitely key. And communication and how you communicate with someone is also a form and a show of respect. I'm a firm believer that police officers, contrary to what anybody believes, I believe every officer should earn the respect of the person they're talking to and not the other way around, right? And so at the end of the day, respect is mutual. We can't deny that. But I think because officers have power, and we're held at a higher standard, we should be making sure that our customer service skills are beyond, right? If your customer service skills don't match and mimic Chick-fil-A's, then you're doing it wrong all across the board. We all know they got some amazing customer service skills. C, do you want to address anything with that, or just kind of his experience overall?
In terms of the arrest, I was confused. At which particular part?
I'll go. Go ahead.
No, it was more the youth engagement. The rest was just kind of an aside. Yeah, it was more.
Oh, like as far as cops engaging with the youth.
Correct. Yes.
And having better relationships, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Because we're talking about changing the culture. I think it would start with the youth and having this dialogue.
Okay, that's what's up.
Yeah, I think that can help. I think that can help. For a while, I was assigned as a truancy officer, so I had to go work at the schools and kind of patrol the neighborhoods to make sure kids were in schools. And a lot of the time, parents and a lot of the teachers on the staff would ask, like, hey, you know, do you want to mentor this kid? You know, can you spend an hour with this person today? And their way of going about it was very, I didn't think it would change much, right? Like how they were trying to do it, they wanted us to spend an hour with one kid, have a conversation. And I just understood that, like, listen, Jay-Z said it best in the song, and he said, like, life starts when the church ends, right? You can go to church, you can be filled with the Spirit, you can hear all the good word of what the pastor has to say, but when you leave that church and you got to walk by the corner where all the guys hanging out, that's when life really starts. So I just feel like absolutely it would help the communities if cops and kids could get together more. The problem that we often run into is just the time to have any significant, in my opinion, any significant results. I think that you have to spend time, right? So there will have to be departments who have the manpower to allow officers to spend time with these kids, to truly, gain their trust and to foster a relationship. Because outside of that, right? And I think that anybody that's a parent would know, right? You can raise your kids, but you're also dealing with, the influence they're getting from school. You're dealing with the influence they're getting from TV. So there's so much influences that people get about the police and their perception, that it would work. It just needs, you would need the right amount of time. And I think that's where the struggle would be. How are we going to get the time for these officers to do that instead of being on the street? And honestly, maybe that's something that, you know, I know a lot of counties have school resource officers. Maybe that's something for that type of police department and not the actual police department. I don't know, Dre, Nate, you know, what do you think? Like maybe SRO or somebody like that would be more, you know, better for them to kind of handle that type of relationship.
Dre, what are your thoughts?
SRO they're put in a bad situation.
Yeah, they are.
Because they are law enforcement officers, but at the end of the day, they work for the schools and they have to abide by the schools. Because many times, remember, we've had to walk up in schools, try to take a student, and the principal, like, you can't arrest, you're going to have to wait for him to be dismissed. You can't pull him out of school, you know, and we end up having to arrest the principal for obstruction. So what it is, you know, like our old department have PAO. They just got an award from the attorney, you know, from the attorney general. Well, the federal from for their works. So you have, you know, the police athletic league, but the problem is because the rising crime, a lot of departments can't spare the officers,
Right.
you know, because it's kind of hard for you to sit up there and play basketball in the neighborhood and mentor these kids, and then every 5 minutes you get a call. As soon as you get out your car to even say hello, you got to get back in your car to answer a call. So you're not really getting that face time and that quality time with the youth, you know. It works in a rural area where the call volume is like, you probably get like 3 calls every hour when you can do that. But manpower issues, you know, every police department across the United States are fishing out of the same pond. They're contacting they just had on the news the other day here in Atlanta that Chief Shields, who used to be the Atlanta police officer chief, who's now in Louisville, Kentucky, has a billboard recruiting officers to come out there to Louisville.
Yeah, I thought that was.
You know, Atlanta is struggling for officers. Gwinnett County is struggling for officers. DeKalb County is struggling for officers. Clayton County is struggling. Nobody's getting into the field. I remember when we applied, they had like 120 people, you know, on a Friday doing an obstacle course and a physical agility test. They're lucky now to have 12 to 15. Lucky. You understand what I'm saying? So you have to look at it. It's not that we don't want to do it.
Right.
It's just fiscally impossible right now in light of manpower issues. You have officers that can't get a day off because it's always manpower.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's true.
So
I think the community has to take that issue on. The community has to step up. Like this can't just be, you know, like, you know, we know the age-old saying, it takes a village. We need some good men from the community to step up and to spend time. And I agree. I think the police need to do it as well. I think it's important. I always just think things from a practicality standpoint. Like how do we actually get this accomplished? How do we actually find the time to actually, you know, foster, like I said, some sort of trust with these kids? You know, an hour once a week is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. They're dealing with too much. So
I agree. I agree with that. I think this might be a good way to look at too, you know, some of our officers that are retired, and, you know, this would be a good way for some nonprofit organizations to step up and say, hey, we can fund these events, because here in my position, I had to medically retire. As you guys know my story, Muslim Jedi, I'm not sure if you know my story, but I had to medically retire in this profession. And so I decided to use this knowledge that I gained over these 13 years, just overall, just my personal experience in this profession, and say, how can I still be of benefit? How can I still be of service despite me not physically still working in this profession? And I decided to start my own nonprofit, but that nonprofit is for police officers in repairing the relationship, along with also this YouTube channel to help bring insight, right? To bring transparency, to really have these conversations that we're having now, so that someone has a police representation from the Black community who's going to be legit, right? Not like some of these yahoos on YouTube, right? We know who they are. No need to mention their names. And the whole idea is like, we can have this conversation so we can talk about solutions, but it coming from a practical standpoint, because you get to funnel your ideas through people who actually have done the job, and they say, hold on, that's not realistic, or that's not practical, or hey, this is very practical. I think that bringing on officers who are retired, they still have the same wisdom, they still have the same understanding, but you also want to vet them to make sure they have the personality to be able to do that job, because there are officers, we come in all different types of makeups, right? And we all have a different mindset. I'm a very passionate person. I love helping people. These gentlemen you see here on the panel as well, they are very passionate and they like serving and like helping. And so that's more important than just having any old everyday officer to do it. We don't need the ones in the uniform. We need the ones who have the heart and truly want to see the change. And so it's very possible. I don't want you to think it's not possible. It's very possible. You just have to get the right ones. And then we have to have the right strategy. And then from there, replicate it. And at the end of the day, like C said, the most important thing is having the community stand up, because a lot of these things and our biggest issue with crime, the absent fathers, are coming from the lack of fathers not doing their part, the mothers not doing their part. And at the end of the day, we have to look at it and call it as it is. A lot of the dysfunction comes from the broken home. You know, the relationship with the police come from these broken homes. People not educating our own children how to interact with law enforcement properly. We have unruly kids that end up having negative interactions with the police. We have music that talks about the assassination of police officers, you know, the mistreatment of officers, the mistreatment of other people in our community. So we're attacked on so many different ways, unfortunately. And I love your question. I think it's an amazing question. And the whole idea, and I'm very solution oriented, which is why I started this channel, which is why it's important that I bring up people that I know have done the job, people that I can vouch for specifically, so we can have these conversations today. And so I think that discussion deserves its own show. You know, me and you get together and let's talk about just raw solutions for our kids. I encourage you to come on my live tomorrow, because I'll be talking about the power of Black fathers, the power of Black families, and the outcomes of not having those fathers present. And for those who don't know, you're talking about a 70-80% increase in child suicide, child behavior issues, child educational problems. We're talking about poverty rates without fathers. And so the impact of not having a father that's active is a big issue. And so tomorrow that will be streaming. It's going to be a good topic. So Muslim Jedi, I appreciate you so much for coming up. Do you have any final words you want to give to these gentlemen up here?
No, just thank you all for your service. I appreciate